Hey everybody, John the Other here, obviously. And this is going to be a longer than usual video, so get a drink of whatever you like and buckle up. We begin. A Halifax doctor accused of sexually assaulting RCMP members declined to speak publicly Thursday, even as police said the number of complaints against him has grown to about 40. Now, this is from the CBC, Canadian Broadcast Corporation, published 2 days ago on January 25th. And yes, to clarify, at least 40 RCMP officers have accused a doctor who provided medical services to them. I'll say right up front, there are two ways to read this. One, as feminists, the rape culture we live in is more pervasive and deeper rooted than we ever suspected. And we need more feminism and more Me Too than ever before. The second possibility, and you can guess which one of these I lean towards, is that within the rank and file of Canada's National Police Force, serving members of that force have become opportunist victim fantasists for whom concepts such as due process, presumption of innocence, and addressing criminal allegations in courts of law are, to these members of our National Police Force, oppressive relics of a patriarchy we should work hard to shed in our pursuit of social justice instead of justice. And if that second possibility turns out to be true, or even partly true, I will vote for the very next politician who makes disbanding and defunding our National Police Force a part of his platform. Current members of the RCMP who may be watching my videos, captains, detachment commanders, polish your resumes. Or do you prefer being reduced from members of a police organization that does police work to becoming no more than obedient water-carrying palace guards in service to the most emotionally impulsive members of our leisure class? Now, I know a lot of people, even those who enjoy watching my channel, have a bit of trouble sometimes being able to tell when I'm saying things for the joke value and when I'm being serious. I am not anti-cop. I want police to be professionals doing their job with professionalism and pride. In fact, I believe so strongly in the importance of the rule of law that I have a copy of the Magna Carta in a frame on my living room wall, and it has hung on a wall of every place that I have ever lived since I was 19 years old. So when I say defund and disband the RCMP, I'm not kidding even a little bit. The CBC article continues, quote, "Especially in a case like this, I don't want to say too much," said the doctor who worked at the RCMP Health Services office in the Halifax suburb of Bedford. Well, at least he's not saying he regrets the trauma experienced by so-called real victims or making any conciliatory gestures, at least not yet. That is always the wrong move, especially for people facing false accusations. That's my comment to you guys listening. Should you find yourself targeted by this toxic victim fashion trend? The article goes on. Halifax Police Constable Carol McIsaac said Thursday the number of complaints is, quote, very fluid and is continuing to climb, nearly doubling over a 24-hour period. The number of bandwagon jumpers continues to climb. Well, that's my opinion, obviously. No CBC typist could possibly say that and expect to keep their job. The article goes on. It's a complicated, complex investigation to begin with because it's quite large, she said. This is Constable Carol McIsaac, noting the complainants are both men and women. Anything that's a historical investigation into anything can be difficult because if there are witnesses, they can forget, or they can move on, or they can be difficult to locate. End of the quote. Now, as much as I find the RCMP being afraid to report crimes to themselves, meaning report to the RCMP being themselves the RCMP, rather funny, there's a serious observation to make here. A sexual assault understood as a criminal event differs from a non-criminal interaction only by the claimed state of mind of the complaining party. It's not a crime that leaves physical indicators the way, say, a break and enter or a conventional violent assault leaves physical indicators. So when we're talking about a historical allegation of a sexual assault, what we're actually talking about is somebody's alleged state of mind 15 or 25 or 35 years ago. And in the new ethic of social justice that everybody, apparently including the RCMP, want to pile onto, a bad mood that you think you remember having 30 years ago is now a crime worthy of ending your career, dispersing your family and friends, impoverishing your children, and undoing everything you've ever accomplished. And the ethic within the rank and file of our National Police Force is apparently that they too, they want to be in on this too. Aspiring politicians take note of this. Normal and healthy-minded people like to live in a country governed by the rule of law. Normal and healthy-minded people do not like living in a culture ruled by the terror of mob justice. The article continues. The RCMP have said the victims were either applicants looking to join the force or they were serving members who were receiving treatment by the physician between 1981 and 2003. The now retired doctor said he treated RCMP members and handled some administrative tasks as well. He told the Canadian Press, which does not normally name individuals under investigation until criminal charges are laid. Now, my comment. The Canadian Press is not a descriptive term for news media in Canada, but it's a news-producing agency which sells stories to other publishers like the CBC, the National Post, and so on. The Canadian Press is like Reuters, okay? But what's interesting is that in this CBC article, it is noted that a news-producing agency does not publish the names of people accused of crimes until or unless those accusations are substantiated with sufficient evidence that a police agency or a Crown prosecutor thinks there is some merit and lays a charge. This is a CBC article that we're reading, though. Are the CBC at least reading their own work? Well, given the recent slander campaigns by the CBC against, say, Albert Schultz and the CBC's recent and frequent collaboration with accusers who later turned out to be liars and fraudsters, I'm going to guess that no, they are not reading their own reporting, and that the nicety they specifically pointed out here is lost on them. The article goes on, and you can read the rest of it if you want. There's another accused doctor, more women being abused, at least claiming to be abused, payments being made in the amount of $100 million, which, by the way, is your money, and that's taking money from your pocket directly, and debt being put on your kids, by the way. And why is the National Police Force, run with your money, paying these claimed victims $100 million, using your children as collateral, and now announcing it to you, bragging about paying that $100 million through the advertising agency called our CBC National Funded News Service, which is also paid for by your tax dollars? This seems like a very, very, very expensive form of virtue signaling. Except that what's being signaled is not virtuous. At least, not if you subscribe to a philosophy in which truth is the highest value, which is to say, that abstract idea on which all Western societies and their institutions are built. There's a reason I'm mentioning truth here. The Me Too movement, of which this is clearly a part, is supposedly all about shining a light on sexual abuse or putting a stop to sexual assault. At least that's the surface level rhetoric. But we've already seen this movement fielding accusations which contained no actual criminal elements, but which nonetheless instantly destroyed the careers of those accused people. Albert Schultz, for example, has not a single criminal action attributed to him, nor does he face a single criminal charge or even a threat of a criminal charge. His accusers' claims amount to not much more than him being occasionally rude, making sexual jokes, and poof, like magic, he's gone, career over, Order of Canada winner, creator of what many people claim is the best and most creative theatre company in Canada. 4 actresses collaborate with the CBC, accuse him of no actual crimes, and he's gone, like so many others. The now expelled leader of the Ontario Progressive Conservative Party, accused of sexual misconduct, not a crime, and within hours of his accusation, his party, including his own personal staff, abandoned him, and he was forced to resign in shame. That he was the most likely person to unseat the questionable Kathleen Wynne is, of course, a complete coincidence, and has nothing whatsoever to do with his speedy and efficient disposal. Not a single criminal charge ever mentioned in any reporting. I have other examples, but those stories haven't hit the news yet. Me Too is not about sexual assault or sexual misconduct or sexual abuse. Those are just plot devices. And even without analysis, it is now at least reasonable to believe one of the main intentions of the Me Too movement is to make all male sexuality at least semi-criminal, and to erase any possible conceptual line between acceptable behavior and criminal behavior for men. Me Too is women, of course. It's the women's movement. But it's not like women all over the world planned the Me Too movement, had meetings, or decided to condemn all male sexual identity or any other conscious intention. Me Too is mostly unconscious impulse being articulated through media. The idea that it is a conscious awakening or a response to specific abuse by men is, of course, on the surface present, but it's the most facile and idiotic description of the movement. It's much more clearly and completely described if we admit that Me Too is women en masse deciding en masse that men shall not be allowed to be complete or sexual beings. The method for such prescription being the reframing of all male sexuality as a pathology and the expression of male sexuality as an offense. Now, if you're a man and not a sexual predator, which is to say you're a man, this seems like a particularly vile and despicable point of view for women, whether conscious or not, or collectively or not, to buy into. So I'll say again, I don't think Me Too is a conscious movement. I don't think it's intelligent. Even as it is articulated by individuals intelligently using news of the day to prop it up, there's a collective shared consciousness idea in play here. But that still leaves us with the question of why, even unconsciously, women would want to pathologize and criminalize male identity or male sexuality. The answer is fear, of course. Not of men, though, or of rape, or even of penises. The fear is of economic hardship and uncertainty. We have almost no confidence in our news media anymore, men or women. People know they're being constantly lied to by elected representatives. We've been threatened with economic collapse every election cycle for the last 2 decades. Populist movements to increase the so-called standard of living for low-income workers consistently result in the replacement of those jobs with kiosks. Students graduating from university are saddled with crippling debt, and the fundamental principles of Western civilization are under continuous attack by the universities whose job it used to be to preserve those values. And thanks to the activism and the continued success of the feminist hate movement, we now have a greater disaffection between men and women than at almost any time in human history. We also have an economic recession that has never been publicly declared, but which has been in effect since the 1980s. And setting aside politically correct social fictions, women have always made use of men as economic providers, just as men have always depended on women for their social validation. A man is a good man so long as the women around him bestow him with their approval. So, what is the result of all these factors? Between men and women, it is women who are more risk-averse, while depending on men who are more risk-tolerant, coupled with all the uncertainty I just listed. So women now, as a collective who have always relied on men's economic provision, are now feeling dread and uncertainty, and have unwillingly and unwittingly created a growing disaffection and a divide between the sexes in which more and more men are opting out of that old provider role. So what is Me Too? It's an unconscious impulse to enslave men and to secure them as providers by condemning all male sexual expression except that which is narrowly defined and falls within an explicit benefit to women. What better way to subjugate people than to make them unable to determine if they themselves are wrongdoers while they are still depending for social validation on the consensus of women? And I am completely aware that this theory sounds like the most harebrained and tinfoil-hatted of conspiracy theories ever. I get that. The alternative theory, the one not articulated in clear language, but certainly in play within the Me Too movement, is this. All male sexuality is predatory, toxic, and oppressive, and women have no independent will or ability to speak when in the proximity of a man with hiring and firing power and his terrifying penis. That's the alternative theory. In fact, that is the basic claim, never actually stated, of the Me Too movement. Or it's a non-conscious and collective movement driven by women's fears and uncertainty articulated as a sex panic, with the goal, not consciously understood, of enslaving men into a narrow mode of female-approved existence to be the economic providers for women. That's my alternative. I'll give you one more theory. Me Too is going to work. Almost all men depend on women for their sense of worth. Almost no men are disagreeable enough or aware enough to shed this as a source of validation. But that doesn't mean men are stupider than women. In fact, by group identity, men and women are exactly as intelligent as each other. So what that means is the ethic of universal condemnation of male sexuality and the criminalization of non-crimes, when committed by men, is now and will continue to create in men a deep, deep deep and permanent distrust of and animosity towards women as a class. Most men will be compliant, oh yes, but that hatred will be the normal value, and it's going to be like that for a long time. Congratulations, feminism. Now, thanks very much for listening, and please let me know what you think in the comments below. Thank you very much to the people supporting the channel on Patreon. There's a link to that in the low bar, and as always, have a lovely day.